The blues scale is a super important part of your improv toolbox, especially if you play rock, funk, or of course, blues solos. But it can sound boring and cliche very quickly. Unless you add a little something to spice things up. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make your blues scale sound less like a scale or a pattern and more like a solo. An easy way to make your blues scale sound a lot more interesting is to use dynamics and articulation. That is super important, and when you combine that with some interesting rhythms, you're going to make your blues scale sound a lot less like a scale and more like a solo where you are playing interesting ideas. The easiest way to turn your blues scale into a solo is to use interesting and varied rhythms. Don't just play a bunch of eighth notes. If you play eighth note lines over and over, that does not sound interesting. Mix it up with some more interesting rhythms. Add in some rests, some syncopations, and of course, always use dynamics and articulations to give direction to everything that you're playing. The only difference between the minor pentatonic scale and the blues scale is the tritone, which you can think of as a sharp 4 or a flat 5. Here is your minor pentatonic scale. And here is the blues scale with the tritone. Because that is the only difference between the minor pentatonic scale and the blues scale, you definitely want to bring that tritone out. So you're going to lean into it a little bit. You're going to hold it a little bit longer. It creates some dissonance. It creates some suspense. So you want to bring that out. You want to lean into it. Sometimes you're going to go into the 5. Sometimes you're going to go down to the 4. But no matter what you're doing, always lean into your tritone. Can you hear how the tritone adds extra grit into that phrase? So lean into that tritone. Or descending. Or of course, you could always use it as a passing tone between the perfect fifth and perfect fourth. But notice how I still accented the tritone just to bring it out more. So, of course, you can use your articulations to accent and bring out notes and make them stronger. And you should definitely do that in the case of the tritone when you're soloing using the blues scale. If you don't want your blues scale to sound like a scale, then you need to treat it like an idea. And the easiest way to do that is to play back and forth between a couple of the notes in the scale instead of constantly running up and down the scale. So in this example, I'm playing the A blues scale. I'm going to start off going back and forth between the 1 and the flat 3, which is the A and the C, and then I'll play a little bit of idea, and then I'll go between the tritone and the 5. When I play like that, it does not sound like a scale. It sounds like a bluesy solo idea. Another really easy way to make your blues scale sound more like a solo is to have a musical conversation with yourself by playing question and answer phrases. The reason that just sounded like a conversation is because I was playing 2 measure phrases that complemented each other. They went together. The first one sounded like a question, and the second one sounded like an answer. So when you're playing your blues scale, think in 2-bar phrases and think about question and answer phrases. A really easy way to make a scale not sound like a scale is to use some larger intervals. When you're just running up and down the scale, it's always going to sound like a scale, but if you jump around in the scale, especially by some larger intervals, it will not sound like a scale. Now, you don't want to do a whole solo where you're just jumping all over the place, because that's going to sound really disjointed and a little weird, but throwing in some larger intervals is going to break up that scale sound and make your solo sound a whole lot more interesting. If you're watching a video on blues scale solos, then I'm guessing that you are pretty early on in your improv journey. If that's the case, then I'd like to invite you to come check me out at the Scott Paddock Sax School. In my sax school, I have several courses dedicated to improvisation at all different levels. I start you out at the very beginning and take you all the way through playing over complex chord changes. So if you're looking to greatly improve your improvisation skills, then stop by the Scott Paddock Sax School today. I'll put a link in the video description. One of the best ways to completely transform the sound of the blues scale is to add in the 2nd and 6th degrees. Now technically, if you add in the 2nd and 6th degrees, it's no longer a blues scale. But if you just sprinkle it in a little bit here and there, it's going to add a whole different flavor to your predominantly blues scale solo. It's going to give you some more jazz sounding lines and give you the opportunity to play some really interesting chords as you are playing through this new scale. That gives you some really interesting sounds because, of course, you have the bluesiness of the blues scale, but then adding in the 2nd and 6th gives you the opportunity to play some more jazzy lines. And then when you jump around, you get really interesting chord shapes. So if you're playing a predominantly blues scale solo, every now and then sprinkle in the 2nd and 6th degrees, and that's going to give you a completely different sound, which will really complement what's going on with the bluesiness of your blues scale solo. And those are some simple tips and tricks to completely transform your blues scale solos. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. If you'd like to dive deeper into my saxophone world, come check me out at the Scott Paddock Sax School. Thanks a lot.